Hi there, my name's Sean Purcell and I am here to give you a review of the March 2025 SBL preseen material. The intention was for this to take place as a live event, but I have had some IT gremlins, so I have decided to record it for you and load it onto my YouTube channel. So hopefully you can get all the benefits and deal with them with plenty of time before the exam. First thing I want to say is people go into a little bit of a crazy panic about the preseen material, thinking it is going to give you lots of tips with regards to the exam, and then other people are trying to sell you something, I don't know, mock answers or something. I work with the ACCA as their subject expert. I do run online courses, but they all sold out long ago. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just trying to give you my experience of working with the ACCA in this area for over 25 years, and I've had more than 10,000 people who have passed their SBL exam with me. So let's talk about this mock. Firstly, some observations. Do not spend a disproportionate amount of time going through the preseen. If you don't believe me, look at previous. I've recorded a video for the ACCA on this, talking about how to handle a preseen. The preseen is there to help you be familiar with any unfamiliar terminology, be familiar with the industry in which it exists, and not expecting you to go and do lots of research on similar industries to which the preseen could relate. Yep, so don't sweat it too much. I'm not going to go through it line by line, highlighting it. The first 2 to 5 pages of the preseen material give quite a lot of kind of information about the dynamics of a charity. There's nothing too complicated there, but I would encourage you to read through it carefully and make sure everything is clear. We then go into HP, historic places, specific stuff on page 6 to 10, and there are things maybe to draw your attention to here. I think the first thing, it introduces a charity. Now, you might not have thought about the dynamics of a charity, so it's really important that you do, and you should appreciate what the difference is between a charity and a profit-making business. The way that business is run shouldn't be really different, but the primary difference would be that a profit-making business' sole purpose is to make a profit, whereas a charity normally has an objective which is non-financial. It might be to save the whale. In this case, it's to preserve historic places. Yeah, so appreciate that. Other things that are given in the preseen about the charity, it gives information on the mission and what the charity stands for. So it's quite important that you digest that information, because in the actual exam, as has happened in previous exams, there could be a situation where the charity might be moving in with another business or might be moving into another area, and some of the things it's considering doing will not match up with the current mission and objectives. So just make sure that you understand that so you can evaluate it for congruence. It talks about trustees and an executive board. It also talks about a 2-tier board. I think they are important things to have familiarity with. First of all, a traditional board, if you imagine a unitary board in, say, the UK, you would have a board of directors which will be dominated by non-executive directors. Only one board consisting of executive directors and non-executive directors. In the case of this charity, it's got a 2-tier board. Now, these are not exclusive to charities. 2-tier boards exist, not in the UK. You tend to find them in Germany and South Africa, and you may have overlooked this in your study, so it's really important you know what a 2-tier board is. Essentially, how these boards operate is you have a supervisory board who make the strategic decisions and choices, and they then tell the management board what to do, but the two boards are separate. So the supervisory board has no executives on it. It has often a quite broad church of stakeholders, which could include all kinds of people, including employees and customers. And then it has a management board which would consider, or consist rather, of professional accountants, IT people and so on. So that is what is happening here. So if you are not familiar with the two-tier board, please make sure you are. Don't be scared of it, but it is mentioned in the preseen, would therefore be an expectation that you understand what it is. Yeah, so understand it. And when we're looking at trustees of a charity, they operate very similar to non-executive directors. Yeah, non-executive directors are there to ensure the best interests of the shareholders are being served. In a charity, the trustees are there to ensure that the best interests of the charity beneficiaries are being served. Okay, so the objectives are not going to be profit for a charity, obviously, and it does mention some things in the preseen of the charity. So that's the difference. That is all the difference. Don't worry about anything more than that. Okay? In terms of other things to look at, well, we've talked about the difference with how a charity can differ. When I've written a whole mock exam based on the preseen material, and I'll tell you a little bit about it in a moment, and then I've got ACCA actual markers who are marking the real exam to mark that mock exam for my students. So they've done it over the weekend. It all sold out a while ago, so please don't email me, can I do the mock exam? It's sold out there, it's all done, but that's people book it up quite far in advance. One question I didn't ask, but I considered asking, because you've got quite a few stakeholders, maybe you should make sure you are fully aware with integrated reporting and why it would be useful in this situation, because integrated reporting gives a much broader church of reporting, which might be appropriate to HP, to communicate with its stakeholders. It also talks in the preseen about risks, so you will have seen this if you've read the preseen. It gives you the risk and it kind of gives you the impact of risks. So that is all given, but what it doesn't do is how we might mitigate that risk. So I think it's definitely worth going through the risks and think about, of those risks, how might they be mitigated? And there isn't one only answer to do that, and maybe I'll have a look through it for you. In my mock I included a question where I asked about mitigation of risks, because I think it was something students should definitely be familiar with. It also gives a website and current actions it's undertaking, similar to the mission and objectives. Just make sure you're fully familiar with that, because again, some of those things mentioned there could contrast with the choices made in the actual exam day that are mentioned in exhibits. There was some information, let me just pull it up. I'm just going to finish this and go down here. So if we look at this here, we go through, sorry for going so quickly, but I'm sure you've looked at this and I'm not going to bore you with all the fairly self-explanatory detail, but we do have some stuff on risks. So how would you minimize risks of a threat of bad publicity? Well, anything reasonable would get credit here, but you would, to prevent bad publicity, probably have some form of environmental scanning to check if anything bad was being said about you, picking things up on social media and the like, and acting on it and dealing with it very, very quickly. If there was a recession, you would try to raise more income. How would you raise more income? Well, how normal charities in real life do, and they maybe engage in more effective, innovative marketing activities. Yeah, maybe we might have to cut some costs so that we still have the amount of money we need to invest. How do you stop employees being lost? Well, you make them feel valued. You celebrate them. you know what you would do in any business to stop your employees being lost. But yeah, make sure they feel valued and loved. If you haven't got sufficient financial resources, you obviously need to ensure that you can raise more. If we were looking at poor performance by suppliers and contractors, it could damage reputation. I here would maybe have, with any supplier or contractor, if you had a builder around your house, you would have a statement of works. So with a supplier or contractor, you would do something similar, and you would monitor it, and you wouldn't pay them until the statement of work objectives had been checked and were all okay, and then you'd pay them. Health and safety, maybe I would have some kind of health and someone responsible for it to check it. Yeah, I would monitor the weather to make sure any extra health and safety risk was mitigated. Yep. Cybersecurity, I would train my staff about the dangers of it, about the threats of it. I would maybe, like you have at work, send phishing emails, which are legitimate phishing emails, to see whether my employees bite, and if they bite, I would send them on further training to make sure they don't do that again. Yeah, so that's relevant, and think about the risk. The other thing, it gives you a kind of information on income. If you do a rough calculation on income growth from 20x0 to 20x3, you'll see the growth of that is at a lower percentage than the growth of expenses. So the expenses percentage-wise are growing a tiny bit quicker than income, if that is relevant. So in terms of financial figures, that's maybe what you can look at. But apart from that, please don't sweat it too much. Yep. What else? Well, if I share with you some of the feedback all of the people who did my mock have got, what kind of things did they do in the exam? That's probably the most relevant to you, rather than thinking about what's coming up. I think if you read examiner reports, you will see, if you go onto the ACCA website, I have commented on examiners' reports in webinars for the ACCA, and in terms of the feedback in those examiner reports, they're not that different to the feedback I've given to my students who did the mock this time. And a key thing they still struggle with, despite some of them having done 8 homeworks on my courses and 3 full mocks, all marked by ACCA markers, they still struggle with timing. Yeah. So the key on timing, I've created a video on the ACCA website about how to manage your time. Please look at that. And that talks about 195-minute exam, 3 hours plus 15, 195 minutes. I say in the video about 35 minutes reading and planning. That leaves us with 160 minutes for 80 technical marks, about 2 marks a minute. Obviously, if you do a few mocks like my students do, you learn about time management and you get better the more mocks you do. So there are still mocks available on the ACCA website. You just have to be disciplined and time them, and try and find maybe a study buddy to help you mark them. But timing is something you really need to understand how important it is. And some people write nice answers, but unfortunately those answers are either too long or too short to the mark allocation available. So again, key critical things that come up every time in pretty much every mock I do and every exam as a report or time a mock. In question 1, I kind of emphasised a little bit on the 2-tier board because it was mentioned. I think it might be something students overlook, so I did a question on that and talked about the benefits and drawbacks of it. I also asked people to consider how the behaviours of a charity might differ to a profit. To summarise the answers to that, profits and charities are both businesses and should operate like a business operates. The difference will be their primary objective in a charity will be non-financial. Maybe a 2-tier, 1-tier board, my question was a little bit technical, but I think it's really important that you are familiar with the differences. I then talked about a risk committee. The key thing about a risk committee, which they don't have, is that in a risk committee, it's not all NEDs. In a risk committee, you have some executive members, because executive members work in the business and as a result are likely to be able to give better input than non-executive members alone. So have a look at risk committees. They don't have one, they do have risk. Would a risk committee benefit them? And then mitigation of risk I've just mentioned. What about a diverse board? I included an exhibit in my mock where I had a board that was kind of a load of people that had worked in other charities but hadn't really worked in maybe commercial businesses. So I was, in my question, getting them to consider whether these trustees were appropriate, and I would have said they weren't appropriate because they didn't have the ability to challenge, question and probe, which is what a good trustee or non-executive would need. So I talked about that, so think about that. Obviously marketing could be a question, so make sure you understand about the 4 Ps and also understand about e-marketing and understand how e-marketing is inspired by the 6 Is. So just have a little look at that. I'm not saying, go crazy. There's obviously holding customer data if they get in marketing. So what's the danger of holding customer data? What are the risks? Cybersecurity, hacking, that kind of stuff. And maybe because they are quite concerned with the environment, would something like EMAS and maybe some kind of social responsibility reporting be something they would consider to give them credibility in their industry? So there's a few little things I included in my mock. They're not tips that would come up on the exam, but they're definitely things in the environment of this company. So in terms of other questions I've received from both my students and from other people about the exam next week, people ask me, what should I do in the next week? What are the top tips? Please don't look at any tips. Yeah, if you've seen any of my other reviews and if you've seen any of my talks with the ACCA, both me and the ACCA go crazy about it, because there are these people on Facebook who you will not find in any official publication from the ACCA. Put my name into the ACCA website, the YouTube channel, the Student Accountant. You'll find lots of articles, webinars that the ACCA have asked me to write. Look at all these people on Facebook. No one's ever heard of them. So decide who you might judge to give you the best advice, the ACCA or these people hypothesizing rubbish. So be careful. But what would I do in the last week? I would keep cool. Yeah, I would keep cool and not be distracted by the idiots on Facebook. I would look after myself, sleep. If I was running an Olympic gold medal race in a week's time, I would not be going crazy training every day and night for the next week. I'd get good nutrition. The things that can potentially hurt you still if you've prepared really well are potential panic on the day. Now, if you know you are a little bit panicky, you're not alone. Lots of people are like that. But there are lots of things we can do, and search the ACCA website about how to reduce stress. There's some great videos the ACCA have produced for you to help you. So certainly familiarize yourself with them. Maybe if you're not familiar with it, teach yourself a little bit of mindfulness, teach yourself some breathing techniques so you don't get hijacked on the day. Follow that. Don't stress too much about the preseen. Take on board what I've said and you'll be doing absolutely fine. I wish you all the best. Keep cool on the exam day. If there's anything that you are really flummoxed by in the exam, my advice would always be think what you would do in the workplace, because that's what this exam is. It's a practical workplace-based exam requiring practical application skills. That's what you've got to use. Take that advice and you'll be fine. Thank you very much for listening. I wish you all the best.